Where are you?
I'm in New York, and Charlie, you are in Washington, right? Or Virginia? I forget.
Right outside Washington, D.C., Falls Church, Virginia.
Oh, okay. And I'm in Los Angeles, so we have some non-equilateral triangle going on.
We do. Colin Farrell, congratulations on this year. You starred in The Lobster as a man who needs to find love, or else he'll be transformed into the animal of his choice, which is a lobster. Which, first things first, what kind of things go through your mind as an actor when you first read a script like this or hear an idea like this? When you first got this idea and were approached with it?
Blanket confusion was my initial response. I had seen the filmmaker's, one of his previous films 5 years before I read the script for The Lobster. I'd seen a film called Dogtooth, and I was just blown away by it. I thought it was just astonishing and disturbing and provocative. And I literally came out of the cinema that night. I was with my sister, and I came out of the cinema going, who in God's name made that film, and what is wrong with him? But it was so brilliant. And then 5 years later, my agent said that he was making his first English language film, sent me the script, and when I read it, I just couldn't. It's so unusual, and the story, how it's constructed, and the rules and laws of the world that the story inhabits, and the behavior of the characters is so unrecognizable. It's so unconventional with regard to what we're used to seeing in film and what we're used to seeing in society. So I couldn't really understand it. I couldn't imagine how anyone could tell the story and it could be in any way natural or believable. But then again, he asks kind of that you don't worry about being natural. It's not about a natural world. It's about respecting the convention of kind of awkwardness that exists, and peculiarity and absurdity that exists within all his films. So yeah, but I really was confused. I couldn't see myself in the film at all. And we had a Skype like this, me and Yorgos, the filmmaker, and I've already said more in this Skype than I said in an hour and a half with him on the Skype. We talked for about 6 minutes. I shit you not. We were on the Skype for an hour and a half, and for about 6 minutes we spoke, and the rest of it was a lot of it was so strange. He's good with silence, Yorgos. But then, yeah, I really wanted to do it. I really wanted to do it to work with him, and just to, I was curious as to see what his process would be. And I did find the script as confusing as I found it. And not even confusing, because I knew what was going on, but there was an awkwardness to it and an inability for me to understand the behavior, because it lacks, the conventions, as I said, that we're used to seeing human beings react in particular ways to certain things, and it lacked all of that recognizability. But I did, by the end of the story, find it ultimately moving somehow when I read it. So yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer for me.
So you mentioned that you had seen Yorgos's previous film Dogtooth, which was nominated for the Oscar for best foreign language film. I was curious, were there any other films that you had seen that had that similar type of tone that you were a fan of, that also made you drawn to this type of work as well?
Not really. I mean, I know he's been compared to Louis Buñuel and other filmmakers. I think as far as having seen his work, and it's banded around a lot, and it has been through the years for various different filmmakers, but I really do think that there is a level of detail and kind of almost a geometry to the way he shoots that to me is somehow reflective of Kubrick's attention to detail and Kubrick's specificity. And I've heard stories about Kubrick moving a cup from here to here on a table and checking out the frame, and Yorgos is very much a painter, and very much somebody who is consummately concerned and attentive to the structure of a scene, not just in how the players move through the scene, but the geometry, every single detail of curtains and tables, and so there was something akin to that. But his work is so unique. It's almost like, which is hard to do after over 100 years of cinema, it's almost like he's creating his own cinematic language. It really is like nothing I've ever seen before. So there was nothing that I could compare it to, or that I felt afforded me a kind of a comfort because it was familiar to. There was nothing like that. It was just so standalone. I mean, even Martin McDonagh's work, I consider Martin McDonagh to be an incredibly original voice in film and theatre. But I recognize the behaviors. They may be heightened, They may, you know, the language is extraordinary and very unique and very specific to Martin's way of writing. But I understand the characters, all of them. I can see human behavior that I recognize in greater or lesser degrees. With Yorgos' stuff, I almost don't recognize any of it. You know, and that's one of the great things with Yorgos' writing, is that he presents to us worlds that we can distance ourselves from and go, oh, that's not, it's a fable, or it's a projection of something, but it's not really us. And then the more you watch it, the more you realize, oh, it actually is filled with tropes of contemporary society, but just disguised under these very extreme or absurd behaviors and situations.
You mentioned this is like a new cinematic language almost, in a sense. So that means that you as an actor are kind of having to learn a new language when you make this film. And, you know, it's certainly not a naturalistic style of acting. It has a very unique kind of manner to it. What was it like adjusting to that on set, you know, as an actor, and working with Yorgos to really kind of develop this kind of tone of this character and this story and this world?
I think Yorgos has got I think he's got a, you know, he would have a great disdain, I imagine, for, I mean, the worst thing that you could have on a film of Yorgos is a bunch of actors sitting around talking backstory and talking about why their characters are doing this and why their characters are doing that. All that stuff oftentimes is very conducive to having a rich creative experience where you can imbue the script that you're on with a certain amount of life and experience and opinion and trial and error. But with Yorgos's material, it's kind of, it's so, again, separated from the conventions I've experienced or I've witnessed in the world of human behavior, that it asks you just to put all that stuff aside, all the stuff that you think you know, all the feeling and all the behaviors that you think you can imbue or you should imbue your character with, and thereby the story. It asks you to put all that aside. I mean, there was no particular moment where Yorgos said to all the actors, I want you all to deliver the lines as flat as you possibly can. That conversation didn't happen, but I think having seen his previous work and understanding that there was a tonal awkwardness and a kind of a muted aspect to the performances, that allows the unusualness of the story to be front and center, and the people who inhabit the story to be secondary. And of course, it's the characters that bring the story alive, but they give life to something that's already established. You know, they give life to something that already exists in a way. So again, you know, the worst thing to do would be to come in and try and be naturalistic. I do remember him giving direction to an actor once, and it was his first day on set, and the actor did his scene, and I heard Yorgos from behind the monitor saying the actor's name and then going, "Stop trying to be so naturalistic." Because in any other film, what the actor was doing was great. He was really, and this was a really natural and really great actor, but he was very natural, and Yorgos was just like, just say the lines, you know. And that's what he wants. Don't paint it with anything. And I think he's very generous in that way, that he allows the audience the ability to color in or to have an emotional or an intellectual response provoked by the material. And that provocation is untainted by the actors trying to, you know, to paint the characters themselves. You know, I think it leaves it open a lot more. It's kind of a more subtle version than the end of The Lobster, where you don't know if David takes his eyes out or not. You know, it's a more subtle kind of through thread throughout the whole piece. But yeah, it was liberating for me. I mean, to play a character that had no guile, no subtext, you know, I just felt the best thing I could do to serve the story was just to listen.
So one of the things, when I saw the movie, one of the things I loved is that tone that all the actors had in delivering their lines and in every action they had were guaranteed laugh getters. You know, yeah. They were roaring, especially the scene with the dancing when Olivia Colman is singing and she starts doing this in that very muted way. I'm just curious. The theater I was seeing this in was howling with laughter, and I was wondering, were there any scenes where, because of that tone and the absurdity of the situations that these characters are in, was it ever tough keeping a straight face for you or any of the other actors while you were filming that?
It's straight, not really, and I know what you mean, but it was almost like was almost like at a certain stage, I suppose, the absurdity became the normality. So it wasn't like we weren't aware that things were weird, but the absurdity kind of became the normality, and I howled laughing a couple of times when I saw the film, like the slow motion of John C. Reilly during the hunt and the twig in his hair and the whole thing, and various other scenes. You know, the heartless woman saying there's blood and biscuits all over the place when the biscuit lady jumps out the window, and there's just so many. But when we were in it, it's kind of like, you know, if you're in on the joke, then the joke can't be funny. You take the steam out of it. You know, we weren't at the time, and there was a few laughs for sure, but most of the time it was just played so straight and so for real, which is even more twisted.
One of the central themes of this film is this is a very absurd take on sort of a real kind of idea of how we maybe overvalue the idea of being in a couple or being in relationships, or rejecting that outright and not being in a relationship. How closely do you think, in this absurd way, do you think this film really reflects kind of the world that we're really living in?
I think it does a pretty good job with two very clear brushstrokes of defining or depicting what in various parts of the world we all live within and under. And yeah, the importance of, I mean, I know times have changed. I'd say in Ireland, where I'm from, I'd say if in the 50s or 60s you were single, particularly woman, by the time you were 30, somebody would have thought you had a disease. It's coupling, and the idea of having a partner, or a husband or a wife, has always been something that there's been great familial pressure put on and great social pressure put on. And I think that's shifting and changing. I think sometimes when change takes place, you can overshoot the mark in change. And I think there's people that are, wanting to live a single life and be empowered by singledom, and maybe it can become a bit of a loneliness in itself. It can become just as much of a kind of a unhealthily imposed thing as having a marriage or a relationship imposed upon you. I know arranged marriages exist all over the world in different cultures and represented by different religions. Obviously, social media has opened up a whole new platform for the art or the pursuit of finding a partner. But I think what the film might do is show that anything in its extremes is not a good thing. Anything, because we think that the hotel, they're living under this kind of imposition and this pressure and this rule of the land that you have to have a partner or you'll be turned into and then there are these other people who are the loners, obviously living in the forest, and they're the ones who are rebelling against the system, and you think that should be a good thing, but then you go out there and you find that their rules of aloneness are just as extreme and maybe more horrific than the rules we're at play in the hotel. So I don't think Yorgos is making any statement. I don't think he disagrees. He's married. I don't think he agrees or disagrees with marriage or singledom or any of the above. But I think he does just provoke and ask questions around the subjects that we constantly find ourselves in a massive confusion around as human beings.
So I wanted to ask about I'll just veer a bit from The Lobster to your entire career has been very interesting, because as you were, I remember like in 2001, 2002, 2003, as you were becoming a much bigger star here in the US, even while you were doing blockbusters, you were also taking on very interesting roles that were not necessarily up that wheelhouse, like A Home at the End of the World.
Yeah.
Is there something, what has drawn you to keep doing these types of roles, even when some might say that it would be better just to do films that that have a much broader appeal and are more bankable?
Sure. I think just a sense of curiosity, really, genuinely. The thing that got me interested in being an actor was just, I think, always having a penchant for wondering what other people, trying to figure out my own thoughts and feelings and emotions by looking at, as we do, we're creatures of example, and always trying to figure out what other families were doing, or what my family dynamic was like compared to my neighbors, not to be better than or worse than, but just to see what other lives were like and how other people were living and feeling and thinking about things. So with that in mind, you try and instill each character you do with a certain amount of humanity and a certain set of ideologies or philosophies, and that can be born of where they're from or what period the story is set in. But at the end of the day, the bigger the film, usually the less unnervingly specific the characters are, by and large. I know that's a generalization, but by and large, if it costs 120 million and it has to reach a wide audience, the characters aren't going to be that specific usually at the center. You get someone like Chris Nolan then, who marries both those worlds. The characters are specific, are dealing with existential crises, and yet it's on a very big canvas. But a lot of the time, so for me, going to work on smaller films, whether it's $4 million budgets or $8 million budgets as opposed to 50 or 100 or something, the work is a bit more specific and it's a bit more demanding, just in regard to, and a bit more, there's a little bit more possibility in regard to the level of inquisition or the level of exploration of the human condition that you are afforded the opportunity to indulge in, So, I mean, Home at the End of the World, I'd read the book The Hours and seen the film, and I loved it. And then I read the book for it and met Michael Cunningham, and I loved that script. And Intermission was another smaller one, and Ondine. And so I have been fortunate enough to be able to punctuate big films with small films or small films with big films. But to me, it never gets any better or more fun than two actors sitting across a coffee table with a really well-written scene. It never, I swear to God, it never gets more fun than that. A really well-written scene and you and another actor or actress sitting across a coffee table. And it's just, like I did a scene once with Ray Winston in a film called London Boulevard, and it was me and Ray Winston in a restaurant. It was one of the most fun scenes I've done. And it's just two boys sitting at a restaurant having a chat for 3 minutes. But it was really one of them. Like, it was more fun than jumping off buildings and Total Recall. And that's a different type of kiddie fun, and I enjoy that too. But yeah, it's nice to just mix it up, man. It really is. It's just, it's more fun.
As talking about you mixing things up between the big movies and small movies, this year certainly is kind of just a microcosm of that in a big way, because earlier this year, of course, you had The Lobster, and in a couple of weeks is Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them is coming out. It's the biggest of big extravaganza kind of movies.
Yeah.
As an actor, what's it like? Because that's a very effects-heavy film. You're sort of acting at a lot of things that aren't there, compared to like movies where you're sitting across the table from someone in very tangible circumstances. So what's that adjustment like to go from a movie like that to something like Fantastic Beasts?
I mean, I suppose you're flexing different muscles a bit, but you're not really. I mean, it's kind of the same thing, I mean, my trailer on Fantastic Beasts was bigger than my trailer on The Lobster. Actually, I didn't have a trailer on The Lobster, so the first thing I said holds true. But the food was better on Fantastic Beasts than it was on The Lobster. No insult to my fellow Irishmen caterers. There was more of it, and it was just fancier. And, you get paid more and all that jazz. But at its core, because on Fantastic Beasts, I didn't work with too many imaginary things. Because I don't work, my character didn't work with the beasts in the film, so any green screen that I had in Fantastic Beasts was in the deep background and was just to make cityscapes. Every single set I worked on, the set was built, and it was an amazing craftsmanship, and all the actors I worked with were real, living, breathing humanoids. And so, but it's kind of the same, man. The bells and whistles are all different. The day you're not as active on the bigger films, that's just, I think Michael Caine said, and pay me for the waiting around, the acting's for free. You're a lot of waiting around on the big films, and on the smaller ones, because usually, like I'm doing a film now that is being shot in 25 shooting days. I think Fantastic Beasts was somewhere around 85 or 95 shooting days, I think. So you can imagine in 25 shooting days, you're doing a lot more work every day. You're getting, because the same amount of pages, 110, 120 page script each, you're just doing a lot more work. So I much prefer that. I much prefer being engaged with the process. I don't need to be sitting in my trailer, in between takes, or I love to be on the set and I love to be working from the time I arrive to the time I leave. So that's patience, I suppose, is just one of the biggest differences. But apart from that, you're still trying to tell a story. You're still trying to breathe life into a story and do the writer not a justice,
So one of the interesting concepts, the concept of the lobster is the idea that, you know, if you don't find a partner, you're turned into an animal of your choice, which I guess is nice, I guess. But I was if if you ever had to make that sort of decision, did this film ever make you consider what animal you'd choose having to be turned into if Olivia Colman came up and said you had to do that?
Olivia Colman, she's so genius.
She's wonderful.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah, I always say a bird of flight. Yeah. Like I don't think not a hummingbird, as beautiful and magical and mystical as they are, but something like an apex predator, like a falcon or a hawk, but a bird of flight. Yeah, I mean, I used to have. Did you ever have dreams as a kid or even as an adult of flying?
Mine were usually falling, so
they were. I've had those too.
Yeah.
Would you wake up in your sleep? Would you feel the?
Yeah, like I had this weird dream that I was on this building that the roof was a staircase for some reason, and I started going down and then tripped and then started, and that's when I woke up. And so that's yeah.
On those days, if you had to approach a set of stairs, did you get a bit nervy?
Oh God, I stayed away from them completely.
That's different. My youngest son got his finger caught in an elevator when he was 4, and he won't go up in an elevator now. He'd take the stairs. But yeah, no, I used to have dreams of flight, so I kind of know, you know, the way you can imagine or experience things in your dream life that you can't recollect having any kind of similar version of acuteness of experience in your waking life. I have that with flying, so I think I'd fly. I'd be an apex predator, falcon.
I want to thank you so much for talking with both of us today about the Lobster, and best of luck with Fantastic Beasts coming out in a couple of weeks. I think some people might be going to see that.
Hope so.
So
not on me though, but I hope so.
So thank you very much for talking to us, and have a great day.
Thanks, guys. You too. All the best to you.